Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Sherry Gaba, who has 20 years of wisdom behind her as a psychotherapist, life coach, and certified recovery coach. We're talking love addiction, codependency, domestic abuse, all this fun stuff, right, Sherry?
Well, it is because of the healing that occurs, right?
It is fun, and healing is possible.
Yes, for sure. That's why we're here. Do what we do.
That's why we do what we do. So tell them a little bit more about what you do.
Well, I started out working in addiction because I married an alcoholic and I was invited to be on Celebrity Rehab, VH1 Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. And so my whole thing was helping people that were struggling with addiction and alcohol abuse. And then I realized, oh my God, this is so codependent. Like, I'm married to an alcoholic, and yet my story is really love addiction and codependency. So about 3 years ago, I just sort of took everything, dropped it on its head. And I said, okay, I'm going to start working with people that are love addicts, codependents like myself, and work with, people to help them that, if they've been in a narcissistic relationship or toxic relationship, that often is part of, the love addiction piece. And that's how they got there. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now. And I absolutely love it. And it's just been amazing, and definitely not a codependent thing to do.
So love addiction, like, what a weird word. How do you know if you're love addicted or someone you care about is love addicted?
Well, what's funny is the word addiction really scares people off. So even though something that's been around, people have written about it, PMLity, it's definitely, it's not necessarily diagnosable or a pathology, but it is a true addiction. And so love addiction is really what we call a process addiction or a soft addiction or a lifestyle addiction. So it's similar to food addiction, or if you were a binge eater or you were a sex addict or an exercise addict or an internet addict or whatever, game, shopping, spending. It's really a mood altering behavior rather than actually a substance. And guess what? You have the same euphoric states that you would of a mood altering substance. So if you're a heroin addict, oh my God, you would have this need to get your fix. Well, relationship addicts, love addicts have the same issue. And really, it's their only identity. Everything about them is based on the relationship that they're in or not in. And when they're not in a relationship, they're in, withdrawal, just like an addict, a heroin addict. When a breakup occurs, the love addict really longs for another attachment. They want those pleasurable feelings back of that lost relationship, just like the addict craves his drugs. So it's really about over adapting to what others want. You have no boundaries because you'll do anything to be in a relationship. So your boundaries are loosey-goosey. You have a fear of letting go because, oh my God, if I let go, then I'll be alone and I'll feel abandoned. I'll feel rejected. I'll feel unwanted. There's a fear of the unknown. And there's this need to change others because you want them to be what you want them to be so you can get your goodies, which is the relationship. So you need others to feel whole. You feel very empty if you don't have a relationship. You look for others for affirmation and validation, for worth. You have, like I said earlier, a really deep fear of abandonment. There's withdrawal symptoms, like I talked about. We actually give up who we are out of fear that, we won't get someone's approval or we'll be alone. And, that was my story, my early trauma, which is based on how I just was born to be a love addict based on my early trauma. And I get into that if you want, but that really is what love addiction is.
So every personality test I've ever taken says like I'm like 100% extrovert, which I find interesting. It's like I don't need much alone time at all to charge. But as I was hearing you describe love addiction or relationship addiction, well, in my case, it could be friendship addiction or something. The difference is I need you to think I'm okay for me to be okay. Is that the difference?
Well, that could also be codependency. So codependency. I think every love addict is absolutely a codependent, but not every codependent is a love addict. Because a codependent is someone that you could be codependent with like you said, your friendships, your neighbors, your church, your temple, your school. You're a people pleaser. You need constant validation. And the symptoms are on a continuum. So they range from mild to severe, but it's really needing someone else. I mean, the love addiction is really needing a person. A codependent could need a person to feel whole, but they also can need a host of other things to feel like, they're needed. That's why often codependents and narcissists find each other, because codependents need to feel needed, and the narcissist wants you to I guess they have what you would call, and I guess you could explain this even better, a narcissistic supply. So they need all that attention. So they're such a perfect match. But it can range from being in denial, having being an enabler. It can be about trying to control another person. It's just very interesting. I mean, basically it's typically they come from dysfunctional homes where their needs were not met. They receive very little nurturing. So they kind of have this, and they feel invisible inside. So that's why they're always looking outside themselves to feel like there's something, there's someone. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And after a breakup, they're looking outside themselves to get that. You get the goodies, I think is the way you said it, which is really cute.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely a difference between codependency and love addiction. But they also overlap a lot.
Really Gosh, that is fascinating. I don't know that I've thought that much about the difference between the two of those.
Well, think of a codependent like constantly needing attention, validation, acknowledgement, and then we'll get into the trauma piece, but that's because they never got it. And that's why I do what I do, because I don't want people to be ashamed. I don't want them to be ashamed that they've had multiple marriages, multiple relationships. They go from one to the next. There are reasons for this. There's something that happened to them that early on that did not get worked through. And that's why I'm a big believer in trauma therapy, really working through this trauma so that you don't have to have someone to feel whole, or you don't have to be needed to feel whole. I mean, that's the whole thing with codependence. It's kind of like, let's say you're a caregiver and you have someone that you're taking care of, or let's say an older person. It's almost like the codependent, just like the caregiver, when that person passes away and they no longer have that job, the codependent feels the same way. It's like, I'm no longer needed. So who am I? What am I? Who would I be if I didn't have someone else to take care of and focus on?
So I was at some people's house. I don't know where this is going to get to. So I was at some people's house who may or may not live in my neighborhood. And they were two women talking about not wanting to take a vacation with their husbands because when their children aren't with them, they feel like they're missing their right arm, was the exact language.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly. Yeah. That's they're codependent on their kids, I guess.
Yeah. And I was kind of shocked when I heard it. Also shocked that they thought I was the same way, and obviously I was like, I teach boundaries for a living. So that's probably not what's going on. I was like,
yeah. I mean, that's where we have to definitely feel whole within ourselves. And that's where the trauma work comes in, because think of addiction or codependency or love addiction. It's a need to leave oneself, because being with oneself is so uncomfortable. So whatever these women were saying, they're basically saying, my kids distract me from myself. I mean, I'm not saying they're not great parents and they don't love their kids, but an addiction is anything that distracts us from being with ourselves. And once we can be with ourselves, we don't need these outside distractions. We're really comfortable in our own skin. I mean, I can go through a couple of things that sort of define codependency, but it's almost like nothing is too much trouble or takes too much time or is too expensive. They'll help any person they're involved with. They're so accustomed to lack of love in personal relationships. They're willing to wait, hope, and try harder to please. They're willing to take far more than 50% of the responsibility and guilt and blame in any relationship. They usually have very low self-esteem, and deep inside, they believe they must earn the right to enjoy life. They must earn your love. Like, in other words, they must do something to receive love. They're very bad at receiving. They're very good at giving. And that's, again, why they pick narcissists, because narcissists take, or addicts take. The codependent or love addict is just used to, giving. But then, and then on the other end of the spectrum, they have a desperate need to control other people. Having experienced very little security in their childhood, they mask their efforts to control people and situations as being helpful. So it's almost manipulative. Like they say, oh, I want to help you, but really what they're doing is, if I help you, then you won't be mad at me. And if I don't help you, you'll be mad at me, and then we'll have to have a confrontation. So it's really like, I'll do this for you so you're not mad at me, which is very manipulative. So I could just go on and on. There's just being a codependent.
Well, that is manipulative. And so I want to bring it back to love addiction and kind of differentiate some of those differences. So love addiction, maybe they don't need to be needed as much. They just need to be in a relationship.
Yeah, love addiction. Yeah, I need to be in a relationship. I love the romantic high of the beginning of a relationship. What's interesting about love addicts, as soon as that high goes away, then they may start looking for somebody else, or they're in love with the idea of being in love. That's really what love addiction is.
And do you see those people relationship hop more often than codependents?
I think so, absolutely. And they definitely, when one relationship ends, they're back into another one. I mean, that would be my story. I could not, to be alone was excruciatingly painful, just like an addict would be in a lot of pain if they didn't have their alcohol or drugs. I was born premature. I was 2.5 months early. I was in an incubator. I'm quite a bit older than you, Sarah. And in those days, they didn't have mothers bond with their babies when they were premature because they were afraid that the mother would give the baby germs. So basically, I had no human touch for 2.5 months. I was fed through my feet. I highly doubt the nurses picked me up because they didn't really have to. I was fed through my feet. So I didn't get that early bonding. So from the time I was, brought into this world, I was always looking outside myself. Please pick me up. Please love me. Please want me. And so that was really my story. I mean, like if my parents would go out on a Saturday night, my brother would be like, bye, have fun, bye-bye. And I'd be crying, please don't go, because I needed that connection so badly. And so in my life, my adult life, I did anything to have connection. So I settled for less. I, picked partners that weren't good for me because I didn't want to be alone. Even when I saw the red flags, I'd stay anyway. This has been a lifelong journey for me. I write a lot about it in my book, Love Smacked, which is on Amazon. And I talk about my journey. And again, I want to eradicate the shame that there's reasons that we're love addicts. There's reasons that we go from one relationship to the next. And it doesn't even have to be the kind of trauma that I experience. There's all kinds of trauma that can make somebody a love addict. And, again, the codependency, it really is very similar to love addiction. But like you said, the love addict is based on the relationship addiction. The codependent is a host of all kinds of other things, that add to that. When you think of codependency, you think of the mom that has a child that's an addict, or a partner that's an addict. It doesn't have to be, but often that's the case. Or the partner that's the narcissist. The codependent is just constantly needing approval, needing to be needed, always giving, having very difficult time receiving, enabling, and so forth.
And I feel like I really like that you said codependency is not just about romantic relationships, because I think it's so easy for people who've been had a bad history with toxic romantic relationships, and then the mom who has the codependent relationship with her child, it's like, oh, but she's just a good mother, right? And we really put some shame on people who've had failed romantic relationships that I would like to see, done. I would like to see that over, yeah.
When I was raising my daughter, she had to be pretty independent because I was a single mom mostly. And I remember going to her high school, and she had to get some books from the library. And I met these other moms that were like, oh yeah, I'm going to go get these books for my kids in the library. I'm going to go take care of this. And I thought, wow, that is so codependent. Like, your kids can do this themselves. And so I really raised my daughter. It's one thing I really did well, was to be really independent. So she had to go pick those books out herself. So that is a form of codependency, doing for others what they can do doing for others things that they can actually do for themselves. That's really the truth. And again, this can show up in friendships. It can show up, let's say you are a volunteer at a church, and you say yes to everything, you never say no, and you can't. I'll tell you this much: if you're a resentful person, you're probably a codependent.
Agreed. Martyr.
Yeah, you're a martyr, and and you want to look really good. And the reason you want to look good, and again, this goes much deeper, is there's this like false self that you're trying to portray, because you probably grew up in a very embarrassing childhood environment, very dysfunctional family of origin. So you're going to try to look really good. So if I do all these nice things at the church fair, or I do all these nice things, for somebody else, then I'm going to look so good, because the worst thing that could happen to me is to look bad. And that's also similar to a narcissist, but the only difference is a narcissist isn't the giver, but he wants to look good. So he'll look good to everyone on the outside, but when the door is closed, he is certainly not being the giver in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what in the world do you do about it? if you recognize yourself either as a codependent or a love addict, what do you do?
Well, first, I just want to remind people that it doesn't just have to be the premature baby trauma type thing. I mean, this can also emerge because you were abused, molested, God forbid, you were neglected, your parents were addicts, alcoholics, they were unavailable. Maybe you were brought up by a single mother who was busy, working all the time. And so it's basically you had no parental, they were unavailable. They were just plain unavailable. And so you become very invisible to yourself, and everything you do becomes other focused. And that's how you become a love addict or codependent. So I just wanted to have people understand that it isn't just my story that makes you a codependent. There's many reasons that this can happen when you grow up in a dysfunctional home and you don't have your needs met, which is really what it's about. But some of the things you want to do is, well, first of all, just being on this podcast today and listening to Sarah and myself and all the work that Sarah's doing in the world, is the awareness. Like now you have an awareness. Oh, this is interesting. And then you make a decision to change and you stop looking for external solutions for your problems, because everything is inside of you for sure. You start looking at all your fears, and fear is a big one. Like we pick this person because we're afraid to be alone, or you help this person because because you're afraid if you don't feel needed, they'll leave you. You want to move out of denial. Often we see the red flags, we go out dating, we know that this isn't a good match, but we just ignore, we go into denial, we minimize, we rationalize. So you want to really look at those things. You suppress your trauma from your childhood, which, again, you want to really look at your trauma piece. And then, do some self-parenting. I do a lot of inner child, outer child, and adult child work with my clients. And it's about separating out, is this our inner child that needs this? Are we acting out our outer child, or is this our adult self? Are we being our adult self, being the best version of who we can be? Become more loving to yourself, become more forgiving. I had to really forgive myself for a lot. I'm one of those people that Sarah and I were talking earlier about some things, and I have to be hit on the head like a zillion times before I finally get it. So be compassionate with yourself. You get it when you get it. And there's no race here. Use all of your experiences, the pain that you've gone through to grow and prepare for a healthy relationship. Trust in yourself. Learn how to let go easily, and get therapy, work with a good therapist, maybe attend a 12-step program. I have a wonderful program called Wake Up Recovery for Codependents. It's $1 to join, and I think we're going to put it in the show notes. And that's just a tribe of people going through the same thing, because there's nothing more powerful than having other people to go through this journey with. It really is so powerful. I mean, I remember when I was a single mom, I joined a single parent group. So, just like your group, Sarah, being with other like-minded people can be so powerful.
And it makes you feel not only not alone, but understood and heard.
Yeah, heard. Exactly. That's what a codependent wants anyway, is to be heard. But so having this tribe, you get heard and acknowledged. And then, it's kind of like there's a saying in the 12-step program, we'll love you till you love yourself. So there's no shame that you're just starting this journey, and maybe there isn't a lot of self-love. You don't have a lot of self-esteem, but I promise you, when you have the love of the community, you will gain self-esteem.
Do you have any favorite technique that you use to help build self-esteem or self-love?
Oh gosh. Well, to me, self-esteem is based on doing esteemable things. So just,
Whoa. Don't rush past that. I loved that statement. Okay. So self-esteem is based on doing esteemable things.
Right. So like being on this podcast is doing an esteemable thing, because you're taking care of you and you're learning about yourself. Reading a really good book about an issue is an esteemable act. It doesn't have to be gigantic, it can be little baby steps. For me, like right now, I'm kind of in a dating phase, and I'm really learning how to date instead of just glob onto the first person that gives me attention. And it isn't easy for me, because I still have these, what can I say? I still have these like desires sometimes to connect. And I'm just feeling so good about myself because not only can I be on my own, but I can really be discerning who I really want to be with, who I want to be in a relationship with. So I'm doing real dating instead of globbing on. And that's making me feel like really esteemable, right? What else? Gosh, there's just, it's just getting a therapist is esteemable. Doing something different than doing something different than what you've always done, right? Like, we know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So doing something different and going, contrary action to what you usually do is an esteemable act. Doesn't have to be huge. I have to remind you of that.
In my book, I have a little note and it says, "Dear Sarah, if it's not working, stop doing it." And
that's a good one, Sarah. I need to do that one for what we were talking about earlier. We were talking earlier about some business stuff, and I'm like, I need to do that. I can just say, stop doing that.
It's a reminder. There's always a new thing in our life that pops up that we need to create change in. And it's still something, "Dear Sarah, if it's not working, stop doing it. Dear Sarah, if it's not working, stop doing it." And things like, this podcast, if it's working, lean in.
Yeah, lean into what's working. Even being honest and transparent. Like, a lot of people are really surprised that I'm so honest about my story, being like, "Oh, she's a licensed therapist. How could she have any issues?" Come on, we're all human. And most people really appreciate when I share my story because then they feel like I'm not alone. They also appreciate that I'm older and, I didn't kind of get all this really until I was in my 50s, and that's okay too. I'm all about just let's get rid of the shame. We get it when we get it. Life, we have a long journey ahead. If we're very spiritual, we believe that it's infinite and never too late to learn any of these principles.
I love it. Well, Sherry, thank you for coming here and helping us on our journey. Any last words of wisdom? And then I will start with telling people where they can find more out about you, and then give us some last words of wisdom.
Sure. So I have a book, Love Smacked, on Amazon. I have my $1 trial program, Wake Up Recovery for Codependence. And I also have a free ebook on what is love addiction, and do you have, well, actually, I'm going to give a different ebook to your audience because of who you serve. It's about narcissistic partners and love addicts. So I will make sure that you get those links, and hopefully you'll put them in the show notes. But again, a free ebook on narcissistic partners and love addicts, my $1 trial program for codependence and love addicts, and my book, Love Smacked. And then if they just want to Google my name, I am all over the place, Sherry Gaba.
Yeah, she's had a very cool history of television appearances. And I'm sure this is like the top of your, when you get to the end of your life, it's going to be like, man, that time I was on Toxic Person Proof. Like that was, that was the moment.
Yeah, and I want people to know I give a lot of free stuff out, lots of blogs, lots of videos. So definitely, if you're not ready to purchase my book or get into my program, just Google my name. There'll be lots of good stuff for you to learn from. Oh, and my IG handle is Codependency Curious, which people love, Codependency Curious.
Absolutely. Sherry, well, I've loved our conversation. Any last words of wisdom?
Well, first of all, Sarah, thank you for giving me this platform. Thank you for the work you do in the world. And my last words of wisdom is there's no shame. It's never too late to learn all the things that you're learning. It's never too late. Don't ever look back. Don't have regrets. You get it when you get it.
I love it. Well, Sherry, thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming Toxic Person Proof.